Welcome to today's talk session. My name is Deidre Moss, and I am the host of Can We Talk? I'm an educator, motivator, and a talk connoisseur. In our session today, we will focus on the contributions of Pompey as we come off the heels of Emancipation Day. However, we're also going to dive a little bit into our history as well. As I would have mentioned before, as we reflect on Emancipation Day. So today, I'm excited to have my guest, Miss Vera Chase, and she is here to help us dissect this topic today. So at this time, I will pass the virtual mic to her to have her introduce herself. Miss Chase, take over. You can take over from here.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Vera Jane Chase, and I am a Bahamian who has been studying Bahamian history for the past 21 years. I do know quite a bit about Pompey, and I do know quite a bit about emancipation, and I've studied the slave history of the Bahamas going back from the Arawak Indians, who also captured the slaves. But the Black history of the Bahamas is not well known around the world, and in fact, I believe a lot of the history was hidden from us because the descendants of slaves would probably be so annoyed that we wouldn't get anything done here. So our history books have been wiped clean of slavery. Most of them have been wiped clean of slavery. So no one will ever know that they had plantations in the Bahamas on almost every island, and I mean every island, where slaves lived in squalor and some lived in prosperity. And I will tell you about those persons or slaves. They call them now enslaved as another word that's hiding slavery. Why would you put enslaved, which is a modern name, in front of slave? 12 years of slave didn't say 12 years of enslaved. It said the popular movie, successful movie, is called 12 Years a Slave. So I'm not using enslaved today because once you were African, you came out of Africa and you were Black, you were slaves, okay?
Ms. Chase, thank you. Go ahead, sorry, go ahead.
So I will answer any questions that Ms. Moss wants to ask me. I think she's the host, and I will answer any question on slavery in the Bahamas that she wants to ask. She wants to ask me. She wants to ask me about the islands that had the most slaves. If you want to ask me which islands the Gullah Geechees are attached to, I know that. I know which islands are like Cat Island. The name Cat Island is not because they had a lot of cats there. It's because of the loyalists that came out of South Carolina, and their hometown was called Cat Island. So a lot of the loyalists out of South Carolina went into Cat Island. So they called the name Cat Island.
Awesome, Ms. Chase. That is a lot to unpack. So you want to talk about you because you are very knowledgeable and certified to talk about this topic. So tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, I am a published author. I'm a writer. I am the president of the Commonwealth Writers of the Bahamas. I also have a connection to the Bahamian last names and where they came from and who brought them here, like the Hepburns out of Cat Island. I know them. I know the Pettys from Eleuthera, the Moss from Morstown, Exuma. I know the Adleys from Long Island, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I also, we have a writing competition every year across the Bahamas from Abaco down to Mayaguana, where children are being mentored in literacy, Bahamian history, and culture. Bahamian history is something that we work on with the Bahamian children, and also we will want to include Bahamians that are no longer live in the Bahamas, so that the children who would be the future leaders of the Bahamas would know our history. I'm preparing a film. I'm busy. I'm a busy lady. It's not a moment of rest for me. And I spend most of my time late at night because the house is quiet. That's when I research Bahamian history and do all the things I want to do at night.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that introduction. And like I said, we have so much to unpack. And I think I think I'm similar to you because I spend a lot of time at night trying to do some research, but that kind of gets me in trouble because that has me tired during the day. So we will unpack a lot today.
Thank you so much, Deidre. I do appreciate you including me in your topic today. I was thinking about it, but I keep telling myself, you're much too busy to get involved like this. But I'm spending this time with you and your friends around the world because I think a lot of persons should know that the Bahamas is not just sun, and sea. We're a country of history. And if a lot of persons, even Bahamians living on other countries right now, if they know that they are connected, a lot of them are don't even know that they're connected to the Bahamas. But a lot of persons need to know that if whatever island your family is from, you are connected to that island. And don't be afraid to try and find out more information, more property that's there for your family. A lot of persons need to just seek, and Jesus said, "The seek and you should find." So a lot of persons need to seek and delve into their history, their history of their families, especially Bahamians. They don't check like that.
Awesome. So I want to thank you for joining us today so we can unpack this information, especially as we think about Emancipation Day. We think about our freedom. We would have read in the books that we would have been freed, the British colonies would have been freed on August 1st, 1834. So let's talk a little bit about that. Let's talk a little bit about slavery in the Bahamas and the plantations in the Bahamas. Anything in particular you would like to share?
Yes, there were two dates for emancipation. The first date was August 1st, 1834, but the British government gave the plantation owners 4 years to train the slaves on how to take care of themselves, how to work, and how to be on their own. They gave them 4 years to do that. So that's why there's a second date of August 1st, 1838, because for the 4 years in between those dates, the plantation owners would have to train the slaves, their slaves from their plantations, how to grow crops and how to sell crops and how to take care of themselves without living on the plantation. That's what happened between those. And on Emancipation Day, 1834, it was a sort of a quiet day. The British government, who was always in control, they send their people to various islands to check and see how everything was going on that day. They went to Abaco, they went to Eleuthera, they went to almost every island, and all the islands were sort of quiet, except Exoma Island, where Pompey lived. They were different. They had to send troops down there to control them because they were uncontrollable. I don't know why they were fighting so much on Emancipation Day, but they fought on Emancipation Day, and they had to send troops down there to quiet them down. In New Providence on August 1st, 1834, was a celebration. The British government killed cattle, a lot of maybe cows and whatever. They had a big barbecue. They had gallons and gallons of molasses, a lot of hot bread. There was all a celebration in New Providence. I guess the celebration was in New Providence because we didn't have that many plantations here. And that's when the slaves were not really slaves in New Providence. They were not really slaves like that, not slaves where you can beat them and kill them, whatever. They were different kind of slavery in New Providence. So that's how it went. And I imagine Exoma people from Exoma have always been liberated like that. They were always free. They were always different. On the persons on Pompey Roll's plantation where he lived, they knew how to read and write. In fact, Pompey knew how to read and write because he used to write letters to England, telling the owner who lived in England what was going on on the plantation. He was educated.
Awesome. So you would have spoken a little bit about Pompey. So can you tell us who is Pompey? And can you share a little bit of his contributions?
I think the whole wide world, his history and information about him have been hidden he was born about 246 years ago, I believe. His date is August the 1st, 1797. He was, when he did his revolt in Exoma, he was 33 years old. He was only 33 years old, but he had already lived a life where he knew everyone on the plantations. There were 5 plantations on Exuma that he made himself. Even though he was a slave, he made himself control of the slaves that lived on those plantations. He visited them every day. From he was a young boy, he visited them. There was about 1,000 of them, and they were on Exuma. The first settlement that was started in Exuma was Steventon. He lived in Steventon, but Steventon is below Rollville. So when he visited them on a weekly basis, he would go from Steventon to Rollville, then he would run down to Ramsey, then he would go down to Mount Thompson, and then he would go down to Roll Town, the 5 plantation. He would go and visit them. He ran 26 miles along the beach. And when he got, it was easy to go along the beach than run in the bushes, in the forest. And that is why some smart person had something going on in Exuma called Run for Pompey. But they don't really know, they didn't really know that he actually ran. They have the Olympics now with Bahamians running up and down. They don't know that Pompey ran every week. Pompey ran every week. He would stay in Roll Town for a couple of days. So that was the last plantation. And then he would run back the other way and go home to Steventon. He was a man that started, the slaves would speak to him, and they wouldn't do anything unless Pompey told them to do it, you know. If Pompey tell them to go, they'll go. If Pompey tell them to come, they'll come. Nobody, no overseer who was in charge of them could tell them to do nothing because they didn't listen to no one but Pompey. And when the revolt started in Steventon, Pompey got them all together and told them what they were going to do. And they stole a Saul boat and they sailed into Nassau with 77 persons on board, including they brought all their children, the adult slaves, brought the children with them. A total of 77 or 78 came into Nassau to speak their part on how they could be freed. That's what he did. And because of Pompey and because of the revolt in Exuma, the British government decided to speed up emancipation. The original date was supposed to be earlier, but because the revolt in Pompey's revolt in Exuma in 1830, the British government sped up the real emancipation to 1838 because of what he did in Exuma.
Awesome. This is some awesome stuff. So Pompey, he would have had some influence on the date of emancipation.
Yes, he did. He had an influence on the date because the British government and his owner, the owner of the plantation, Dennis Roll, who lived in England, they realized that the Exuma slaves has an unrest brewing on them. I mean, there's a lot more that I can tell you, but we don't have enough time. But Pompey would run. When the British soldiers came into Exuma to check out what was going on down there, they were going to check the plantation houses to see if the slaves had hidden guns because they were so free. They used to have guns where they go shooting, bird shooting and stuff. And the slaves in Exuma used to go all over the place. They never used to stay in no plantation.
So these were slaves. So you're saying these were slaves with guns?
They had guns. They had freedom. They had freedom. They had little guns. I don't know if they were big guns, but they had guns that they would go bird shooting. But they used to get in their boat and go all over the place and be gone for weeks. Nobody was in control of them.
Wow.
They called them uncontrollable.
Wow. And this was in the Exuma Keys.
This was in the Exuma Keys. They had in Exuma, yeah, in Exuma. They were. I think that's the only island where slaves were on their own.
And so he would have had he played a big role in emancipation in the Bahamas.
He did play a big role, but then emancipation in the Caribbean.
Why is his history? Why is it not spoken? Why do you think it's not spoken of as much?
Because the early historians who were Caucasians, they wiped the history of that part of the history book clean. They took all the plantation names. They took those things out. You know that in Rollville, they don't have Rollville Plantation, or in Steventon, they don't have Steventon Plantation. They took the plantation name off and just call it Steventon. Early historians could do that, especially if they were not persons who were so happy about slavery. If they didn't want Black people to get to know their history, they would take those things out of the book and write the book the way they want to write it. So it's up to us as Bahamians and other persons around the world who know our causes, is for us to bring the real history to life. And I intend to do that.
And I appreciate you for that, because an important part of knowing where you're going is knowing where you would have come from.
You need to know where you come from. It's exactly. And we have places in New Providence where Africans actually lived, and the names, there's a street called Kwaku Street, someplace on East Street. Kwaku was the name of the Ghana. The slaves from Ghana lived through Kwaku Street, and it bears their name.
Up until this day, wow.
Yeah, still have the Kwaku. If you can Google it, Philip Kwaku was the Bishop of Ghana.
Wow.
So the slaves out of Ghana, they went to that area of East Street, I think. Kwaku Street is the name. And then we get Congo Town Andros from the Congos, Black slaves out of the Congo. Then we have the Congo Jonkunu group in Fox Hill. Congo was an African tribe.
And then you would have also talked about Cat Island as well.
Yeah, but yes, Cat Island is, I'm a pointer from Cat Island, so I do know the Cat Island history. I do know that when James Carmichael Smith was governor, he had several revolts in the Bahamas. He had the one in Exuma. He had one in Cat Island, where the slave on the DeVoe plantation, where the slave Dick DeVoe sacrificed his life for his family. There were several plantations, a lot of plantations in Cat Island, several. I do know one, the Great Hope Plantation, I do know one in particular, but then there were others. There was the Freeman Hall Plantation, that was a plantation of 2,000 acres in Cat Island. Then they had the, like I said, they had the DeVoe Plantation, and people with last name, the Poitiers. I'm a Poitier, and Charles Poitier had a plantation in the area of Artistown and Orange Creek.
Awesome. And then you also talk about the history. You talk about the history of surnames as well.
Yes, I do. I do know the history of surnames. I already told you about yours. I didn't tell you all, but I've researched like the Hepburn. I've done the ones in Cat Island first. James Hepburn was a loyalist that came in from North Carolina, came in from Wilmington. He came into the Bahamas and brought his slaves. King George III gave him property in Cat Island. He was the first member of Cat Island elected in 1784. James Hepburn, that's the Hepburns, all the Hepburns. Last name of the Cat Island, James Hepburn is their man.
Awesome. And can you share about the moss?
I just shared something on my site today about James Moss. His plaque is in Christchurch Cathedral on the wall. He had one of the largest plantations in New Providence out west. His nephew had plantations in Crooked Island. James Moss, he's not buried in the Bahamas, but he died in Guyana. When he went down to Guyana to purchase more slaves to bring to the Bahamas, he fell right down during the slave bargaining in Guyana.
Wow.
His name was James Moss. I've also done the Mosses. Well, I did my family, the Poitiers already. I did them. The gentleman that brought the Poitier family to New Providence is buried in the Western Cemetery. I found his grave. He's buried with his son, Christopher, who's 9 years old, and his father-in-law, Joseph Hunter, who was also a plantation owner in Cat Island.
Awesome. So is there anything else that you can share with us about the slavery in the Bahamas and the emancipation of the slaves in the Bahamas?
Well, the slavery in the Bahamas was not too bad like slavery in the United States was, because the British government, even though they're the ones who bought the slaves in the Nassau, it wasn't as bad as some other countries. But one thing the British government did do is, after emancipation, they would stop any boat that was going down the Caribbean with slaves. They would stop them and bring them into New Providence. And the slaves that were brought into New Providence were called liberated Africans. So what they did with them is they trained them different. They trained them, they educated the liberated Africans, and they were the ones who were in control in New Providence after a while. They had the liberated Africans who were sort of in control in New Providence because they thought they were better than others. Then they had the people of color, that's the light-skinned people, they were respected too. And then they had the whites. They were liberated Africans were more in New Providence than whites. And a lot of our descendants are liberated Africans. And every country in West Africa is represented in our descendants. Every country, including Ghana, Nigeria, Kenya, Sierra Leone, and all those West African countries. The slaves are descendants from those people.
Oh, wow. So you're saying that the liberated Africans that would have been transported here, that you said that they thought they would have been better?
Yeah, they thought themselves as better than the other slaves, because because the other ones came as slaves or the different.
Okay,
the
yeah.
other ones came as on an English ship. The ship intercepted them going down into Cuba and wherever they were taking them. The British merchant ships would intercept the boats going with them, take them off, bring them into New Providence, and educated them. They were called liberated Africans.
Awesome. And then you said that the British, they would have stopped those ships that were transporting the slaves to other parts of the islands.
The part of the Caribbean. And they also intercepted some going into the United States as well. So there was always a war going on between who should have the slaves that were going into America, or why should the British government take them off the ships and bring them into New Providence. New Providence was a drop-off point for liberated Africans.
So does that have anything to do with, I guess sometimes when people say or they comment that maybe Bahamians are more easygoing, do you think that has some roots in that?
Well, yeah, that has some roots in it, but then some Bahamians are easygoing, but then they were from different tribes. I mean, when they brought these people in on the boat, they were from different tribes and they didn't know what to speak, they didn't know the same language. If you have a boatload of people that's coming on the boat is Ghana, Kenya, Sierra Leone, Togo, or whatever those islands, those countries are, they spoke different language. The men, they speak a different language. The crews speak a different language. So they were not speaking the same language on the boats, Even doing slavery, when they bring them on the what they call the slave trade. With the slave trade, all the people they brought out of Africa, they spoke different languages.
Wow. So you had different...
They were sitting on the boat and they could not say one thing to each other because they didn't know what to say to them unless they were from the same tribe.
Mm-hmm.
The Congos and the Pakus or whatever, all those on the boat, they spoke different languages. That is why in the Bahamas, they had to make up their own words to get to understand.
Mm-hmm.
They were like strangers.
Mm-hmm.
It was difficult, It was difficult being a slave, and persons don't explain to us that on these boats with these slaves that they didn't know one another. If you look at any picture of slaves on a boat, you see their eyes are open wide. They're staring because they don't know the neighbor next to them. They don't know who they are. They can't communicate. You know that, right?
Yeah, so you have people, you have them, they've been transported from their country, and most likely you're next to someone and you don't speak the same language and you don't know where you're going.
They don't know where you're going. They don't speak the same language. You can't say I'm hungry or whatever because you don't know it in the Congolese or whatever language. That's another word that you don't even know nothing about.
So they had to create their own form of communication.
Exactly, their own form of communication. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that is how we got got some of our words. And then you would have talked about the gullah. You spoke about a little bit about the gullah, Miss
Well,
Chase.
well, the Gullahs, and I know Queen Quet very well. She's the queen of the Gullahs down there in Beaufort, South Carolina. I just spoke to her on my LinkedIn page the other day. They're doing all sorts of wonderful things down there. And then on Facebook, they're trying to find a Bahamian connection with the Gullahs because we cook the same type of food, and we eat and we speak the same way.
Yeah.
We are closely connected because in 1662, Charles II, we were sister cities with North and South Carolina. Charles II gave the Bahamas to the Lord Proprietors of the Carolinas, and we were sister cities from 1662 for about 40 years.
So are we still trying to discover the connection between Bahamians and those from, you said, South Carolina?
Yes, and especially Beaufort, South Carolina. We have two loyalists that came to the Bahamas in 1782, and that was Colonel Andrew DeVoe and his father. We have William Lightfoot from Lightfoot Key. All those people came out of Beaufort. We had John Wells, who bought the first printing machine. They came out of Beaufort, South Carolina to the Bahamas.
So there's a connection there.
There's a connection there. Beaufort, South Carolina is more connected. That is why a lot of them, I told you, from that area went into Cat Island. That's how come Cat Island has such a strong accent. And their food is almost the same because they're closely more connected. The Gullahs are more connected to Cat Island than any other island.
Wow. And then, and as you would have mentioned, there are similarities in the way that we speak.
They speak the same way on the contract when the man from the Bahamas went on the contract, and the white owners was trying to figure out who was from South Carolina and who was from the Bahamas to separate the Bahamians from the Americans. They couldn't do it. The only thing they did was they got a drum or pot and they started beating it and making noise. And the Bahamians would jump up to do some dance. And that's how come they knew the Bahamians from the South Carolinians.
So they were able to tell the difference between the Bahamians. They did the motion. They wanted to dance on that drum beat.
Because the Bahamians know the Junkanoo beat, you see? So all they had to do was make the Junkanoo beat, and the Bahamians would start to dance and beat drums and stuff. And that's how come they know the difference. Because the white people didn't know the difference between the Gullah Geechee people nor the Bahamians. It's difficult to find out.
And then you also talk about the contract, Ms. Chase. You talk about the contract.
I studied the contract. Any subject you want to talk about today, I studied the contract.
You talk about the contract, and sometimes I don't think, those contributions that Bahamians would have made to building up those communities are not really highlighted.
But the contract, the Bahamian people and the Caribbean people fed the war, the Second World War, because the Americans had gone off to fight in Europe and the fields were unattended. So I forget the colonial office, what's the last governor? I forgot his name, King Edward III. Anyway, what happened is the British government got together. I think it's Winston Churchill and the rest of them got together, and they decided to hire people from the Caribbean to work on the farms in the United States because the Americans had gone off to war. So the Caribbean actually fed the Second World War.
Awesome. Can you just adjust your camera, Ms. Chase? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's better. So that there's a influence as well in building up those communities and farming in those communities.
Oh yes, they did. My father was on the contract. That's how come I know so much about it. And I want to know where he went because he didn't talk too much about it. He talked about going to Georgia. So I actually interviewed some of the contract persons when they were still alive. I went into Luther and interviewed them, and they told me where they went. My cousin Liza Stubbs said she went into Maryland where they picked apples in Maryland. And my dad went into Georgia because he was always talking about the Georgia trees. They were so tall and whatever. So, I was able to get some information from some of them.
Awesome. But you said your daddy didn't want it to tell you where where you would have
No, he
went.
didn't. No, he didn't. No, he didn't really tell. He didn't talk about that much because some of the things that they did to them on the contract was bad.
Oh wow. Oh
Yeah,
wow. Oh wow.
and he didn't want us to know.
Can you adjust your camera one more time for me,
Oh,
Miss Shea? Okay, that's better. Yeah, so but we didn't really hear much of those things, how they were treated on the contract. We hear that okay, we had some Bahamians who were transported to some parts of the Americas.
no, they're not
Different.
going to tell us that because it's too bad. Some of the things were bad that happened to them.
Oh
It's
wow.
very bad. It's very bad. It's not as easy. See, we sugarcoat everything. We
Hmm.
hide the slavery. We said that the information with the contract actually is hidden for what 100 years. So let's see, it started in 1943. They said for 100 years. What is that? That's a 2043. I don't know.
Oh wow.
The
So
information the contract in at the archives of the Bahamas is hidden.
it's hidden.
Yeah.
Oh wow. And they won't allow it to be released, you said, until
And
after certain.
they'll tell you that they can't find them or the records were destroyed. So, but persons, when they were in charge of the colony, they could put information like that in the files and say they're not to be opened or don't tell us anything about. Then, as a people, I don't know which part of Africa Bahamians came out of because we don't ask questions. We never said, well, what happened to this one? What happened to the next thing? We never asked no questions.
Don't ask any questions. So it'll be interesting to know which tribe out of Africa we would have came from. or
Oh, they can. I have a listing. I'm writing a book called The Slave History of the Bahamas. I have all the information on how many slaves came out of Ghana, on how many came out of Nigeria, and how many came out of South Africa when they came up. I've been researching the book for a while.
awesome, awesome, awesome. And so it's a lot of information to unpack as we consider Emancipation Day, and we talk about the freedom. We talk about being free from the British and being emancipated as slaves. But there's so many issues that come along with that.
No,
That we don't talk about.
no, we're not really emancipated like with knowledge. We don't have no freedom of information. I think we just free on a bodily form, but not for information. Because, like I say, some history, I am an historian of the early Bahamas. I can write. Historians write what they think they people would want it. What they think. Historians can write anything and nobody checks them. They write all sorts of lies and stuff like that, and nobody checks. They said that Christopher Columbus took all of the Indians out of the Bahamas, but he did not because he couldn't catch the Indians in Long Island, those caves in Long Island. He couldn't catch all the slaves in Abaco and those other islands and Eleuthera because they're deep caves. And if the Spaniards are wearing these big old heavy clothes with hat and boots and this thing and that thing, it's impossible to get in those caves to take all those Indians out.
It's amazing. So we learn in school that Christopher Columbus killed out all the Indians in the Bahamas, but that's not.
He did not kill. Why do you think Long Island people have the certain color of their skin in Abaco and those different places? Because they could, and Andros, they could not catch. How could you catch 30,000 people and carry them off to Tingham? The Indians weren't stupid, and they knew these forests and caves very well. So you think now, if you come with your sword and your boots and your big old Spanish hat and whatever, running through the bushes looking for slaves, you think you could catch them looking for Indians? You actually think you catch all of that?
Well, who would know the territory better? Those familiar with it.
And those Indians know where the food is in the cave and whatever. They run, the Spaniards run to one end, the Indians run to the next end.
So all the Indians, they didn't die out because, I mean, what I learned in school was the Indians who were not killed by Christopher Columbus either died out from diseases and.
Well, let me tell you the story about the Christopher Columbus people. Christopher Columbus, when he left the Bahamas, he never came back. The conquistadors, when he went to Spain, and when he did go, he did take a couple of Indians from Bimini, and they went to Barcelona. That's where he had to go to report what happened in the Bahamas. He baptizes Indians in the Cathedral Church of Barcelona, Spain, before he took them to meet the Queen Isabel and the rest of them. And the church is still there, and the fount is still in Barcelona, Spain, where Christopher Columbus baptized Indians. He did not return to the Bahamas when he left. But the Spanish conquistadors and the Spanish explorers, when they knew about the Bahamas, they came back and tried to catch the Indians. And Bahamians weren't stupid from then. They didn't want to let nobody pick them up. So the history books are definitely wrong. And to top it all off, the statue in front of Government House with Christopher Columbus, the freed slaves gave James Carmichael Smith, who was the governor, the money to purchase that statue.
Wow. So the freed slaves gave the governor the money to purchase
because they were working on the Carmichael Road area all over the place. They're working at their farms to take their things to market and make money. Because James Carmichael Smith was an abolitionist. Carmichael Road is named after him. He was an abolitionist. He wasn't a treat mistreat no slaves on his run. That's why Pompey and the slaves was trying to get to him on the boat when they left Exuma. They was trying to get to see the governor because they knew he was an abolitionist.
So Mr. Carmichael Smith, he would have been the one to kind of fight for the freedom of slaves.
He did. We should have a big statue of him, not only on Bay Street, but on 3 or 4 different areas of the Bahamas.
And that's interesting stuff because you drive along that long strip of Carmichael Road, but do you really know the impact and the history of who that street is named, who that road is named after?
The governor's name was James Carmichael Smith. He came in 1829, he came from Canada. The English government sent him to Canada to work on as an engineer in Canada. And from there, he came to the Bahamas in 1829. And when he reached the Bahamas, he picked up the ball. He started to run with it with slaves. They didn't know that he was an abolitionist.
So they sent him here not knowing that he was an abolitionist.
The people, when he came into Nassau, the white people who lived in the Bahamas did not know he was an abolitionist.
Wow.
And they ran him out of town.
Wow.
He was here for 4 years. And all the slave uprising, he was involved in the one in Cat Island. He was involved in that. He was involved in the one in Jamestown, in Lutheran. That's why Jamestown is called Jamestown, because James is for him. James Carmichael Smith. That's his area, Jamestown, in Lutheran.
Wow. This is some interesting stuff.
I told you I know Bahamian history inside, outside, upside down, and upside down, everything.
Interesting stuff. And even though we know that slavery was definitely a difficult, challenging period for our ancestors, we also learned that, some of the slaves here, it wasn't as bad as in other countries.
No, it wasn't as bad. No, because the British government tried to keep a control on it. Try to keep a control on everything. They tried.
And do you have any additional comments for as we reflect on Emancipation Day and freedom of slaves in the Bahamas, and as we look to our future? Do you have any further comments?
I implore Bahamians or persons around the world to seek. It's not a bowl of roses, whatever. It's not like that. Like we claim to be in our country, that we sun, and sea and everything like that. We have to know our history. We have to, and a lot of persons who are crowded up in New Providence need to branch out into the family islands where their families are from. Eleuthera and all those different islands. I mean, we have more than 700 islands, Deidre. In a recent count, we have more than 2,500 islands, rocks, and keys. We all over the place.
And each of them have their own histories, and that's
each of them have their own history. Each of them have their own history. Each island have their own history. Each of
Oh,
them that go like the Biminis and the Bimini. When Ponce de Leon was looking for the Fountain of Youth in 1513, he stopped in Bimini, but he didn't stay. But and when they recently, not recently, but when the Yawak Indians went into Spain, they told them that there was a spring in Bimini that they swim in that keep their hair black and their skin smooth. That's what they was looking for.
and then you talked about it was interesting to hear you talk about the exhumas and the freedom that they had, that the slaves were able to tow guns.
Yeah, they used to go bird shooting and looking for the flamingos, they call them. They call them
Flamingos.
flamingos, yeah.
Yes, flamingos.
And it's to tell you the truth now, you know how far they had to go to look for the flamingos? If they
Those,
want to, the flamingos are way down in Nagua, and some was in Andros, so they had to film the boat to look for the flamingos, because I don't think no flamingos was in Exuma. But that's what they say in the history book. They used the gun to look for flamingos.
and then you talk about the history with and the connection with those from Cat Island and those from South Carolina, the Gullahs.
Yeah, the Gullahs are closely connected to them. Very, very closely connected to them. I could even, like I told you, I could name the gentleman who I think named the name Cat Island. His name would have been Andrew DeVoe Sr. There were two. We are mixed up in our history, so I'm telling you that historians could write what they feel like writing when they feel like writing it. There were two men that came in from Beaufort, South Carolina, with the same name, father and son. It's Andrew DeVoe Jr. and Andrew DeVoe Sr. The senior was the one who was mixed up in American War of Independence, but the junior was not. But they were treating his father so bad. He and his father left Beaufort, South Carolina, and came into they were banished. I shouldn't say left. Anytime they come this way after the American War of Independence, they were banished, not left like that. They just tell them pack up everything and get out. So everybody with the last name DeVoe came out with these people, their descendants came out, these people out of Beaufort, South Carolina.
Wow. So they, after they were banished, they came to the Bahamas.
They were banished from Beaufort, South Carolina, from the Carolinas and all the southern colonies. And they were sent to St. Augustine, which was the British area, the only British area that was left after the American War of Independence. And they waited in St. Augustine, Florida, until King George III gave them permission and gave them the property to come this way. They stayed there, thousands of them up in St. Augustine, until they were given permission to build, Dennis Road. You have 500 acres in Exuma. John Petty, you have so many acres in Eleuthera. They were given their land like that. And when they got the word that the land that they got in the Bahamas, then they bought them. They came in these British warship, whatever, bought them. They were properly brought into town, not no small boat. They were big boats.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. And you would have talked about a little bit of history of Andros and Eleuthera and Long Island, and how the slaves were able to get away from the Spaniards who would have tried to capture them. They hid in the caves. and not all of the Indians would have died out. There were some who were able to get away. And so it's interesting to learn about the history and the difference between what we were taught in school and what actually took place. So I want to thank you for sharing and imparting this knowledge to us as we think about Emancipation Day, as we think about freedom in the Bahamas, not just freedom in the body, but also freedom in the mind, and having an understanding of where you would have come from, and having an understanding of your history. When you know where you would have come from, you will know where you're headed. And so that is very important. And also understanding the importance of some of the stuff that were kept from us. Because we understand that there was a lot of things that would have gone down that is not really talked about.
Listen to me, did you? One thing that's really bothering me, that as a country, we don't want to hear the name. Some persons don't want to hear the name slave at all. They get very offended. They say they're not slaves, they are Bahamians. They're not slave descendants. They say they're not.
Why would they say that? when
They say
when
that
the reality is that the slaves were captured and they were brought to the Bahamas.
no, a lot of Bahamians don't want to call themselves
But
slave
they don't have to
descendants.
call themselves slaves. The reality is the reality.
No, they don't want to say that they did connected to Africa or they were never slaves and they are Bahamians.
But
That's what they say.
the reality was that the slaves were captured and they were brought to the islands of the Bahamas.
They need to be educated and know that if they look at the color of their skin, they know they didn't have no Irish connection like that. Maybe a slave only because William Wiley from the Wiley's estate out west, he was Irish and he was a loyalist. So I don't know. I guess it might be. This is why I work with children writers, the children from 4 years old, to educate them and let them know where their origin and their Bahamian history. A lot of them know the history. A lot of them, and the ones that don't know, like coming on board, it's my duty while I'm here in this world to really let them know the history and
Yeah.
culture.
Awesome, and that is what this platform is all about. Sharing knowledge. We love to share meaningless information, but sometimes it's important also to share information that is going to have an impact, and that is what this platform is about. And I want to thank you for sharing that, because it's one thing to not know and it's another thing to not know but want to learn, and being accepting of learning and accepting of knowledge. And I want to
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that.
I am trying my best, Deidre, to get the word out. I'm only one person, and sometimes when you're only one person in a fight, not much happens. And I pray to God a lot to let me do it the right way, let me explain it the right way, and let me find persons who think the same way that I do.
Absolutely.
That as Bahamians, our rich history, we have to open up the doors a little bit more. We are promoting sun, and sea, but we have history that can bring, if they're looking for people to come to the Bahamas, they can go into the southern colonies where we have names that are similar to the names in the Bahamas, Rhode Islands, and try and bring them into Nassau or bring them into New Providence. If that's what they're looking for, history could bring anyone to look around the town. But this island is where my ancestor, where the loyalists came, like John Petty. He came out of the States and he went into Eleuthera Island. That was his island, and things like that.
Definitely, and as you would have spoken about a lot of the loyalists who would have been coming out of Britain, who would have been coming out of England, they would have made stops here. When you talk about James Moss, who would have made his stop here as well, you had a lot of loyalists. Yeah.
The loyalists was given property on every island, and that is why the last names are so. And they don't know that the last names are actually connected to England or to United States or whatever. And a lot of persons would like to know how like you said, I told you the last name Moss, I told you where that originated from. And you mentioned Crooked Island, and you connected right there. I'm a Poitier, the Poitiers are the Cat Island. I told you, the Campbells are the Cat Island, and things like that. So, but we're not interested in things like that. Maybe COVID has taken over the educational background, whatever. COVID might have taken it.
Well, when you talk about COVID, I want to know what are your thoughts when we hear that bush medicine, when we hear about the thoughts about bush medicine and bush medicine not having an impact on COVID, but we would have learned that our ancestors would have utilized bush medicine to overcome, to provide remedies for so many diseases.
They do. And I guess I have a book here with bush medicine that was used by the Arawak Indians.
And this is centuries. This is
They came with the Bahamas and they are 500 AD, 600 AD, just after the death of Christ. They came in 600 AD, and I have a book with the medicine they used. And I look at the medicine, I say, cheapest, some of this is some medicine they used on Cat Island, the same trees and bushes.
And it would have worked for them.
Yeah, it worked for them. They had the book has a tree, a plant for every disease. But for the COVID, there's a lot of I think the COVID, to me, the COVID is just a bad flu. Bad. Put another bad next to it. It's just my thoughts.
And there are remedies, because our ancestors would have used those bush teas to overcome a lot of illnesses. So I think that we definitely do not need to minimize our culture. I think that the Bahamas has a rich history and a rich culture to unpack, and we definitely do not need to minimize our culture.
But Deidre, the people don't know about if it wasn't passed down through generations on different bush teas, the day people, the younger generation, don't know anything about bush medicine. They don't know anything about it. They don't know that when problems come, they don't know what to do. And they panic because we didn't pass that history on to bush medicine, on to anybody. I don't think that many persons would have only the older persons would know what that used, the fever grass and the pear leaf and all those
the noni and the moringa
and stuff like that. They don't have that. No, and the moringa trees growing wild all over the place with the stems, those long stems. And in Africa, they use that as protein. They make flour out of the seeds of the pods, and that's what they use in Africa, moringa seeds.
Well, like I said, it's one thing to not know, and it's another thing to want to learn. And for me, I may not know everything. I don't know about all the bush teas and all the leaves, but I'm willing to learn. I'm willing to sit at the feet of someone and learn.
There's a lot, and they probably right in your yard. I'm looking at the pear leaf right now, and the sour leaf, and what else? The spice leaf, and we have the noni and some other trees. I'm a tree person, so I have a lot of trees.
Well, the most I know about is the cerasee. So
you have this, and then you have the bay geranium.
Oh yes.
For the flu too, that grow along the beach, but it won't grow too much. If it grow in Adelaide, it won't grow where there's a lot of persons walking around it. It's a tree that it won't grow where a lot of persons are. Nor does the cerasee grow where there are a lot of persons stepping up and walking around.
Awesome. Well, Ms. Chase, I want to thank you for spending time with us today and sharing a little bit about our history and unpacking some stuff for us today. We talked about the contract. We talked about the slaves. Some of them were rebels.
Rebels, especially those on Exuma.
The Exuma rebels.
They don't take no mess down there.
They were bound, but in some ways they were free.
Oh yeah, they couldn't go nowhere. They wasn't going. As Pompey tell them to go, they wasn't going nowhere.
And then some of them, they couldn't keep still, always on the go.
Always on the the ones in Exuma, the ones on the other islands didn't have the freedom to go out in the boat and with guns and things like that, like the Exuma slaves. See, the Exuma slaves didn't have no one to really watch them like that. Their owners lived in England.
Oh,
Dennis John Roll, who owned them, the plantations, they lived in England, and they had overseers, but they paid to watch them and look after them and get clothes and stuff for them. They were paid. The overseers were paid. I think one was the Thompson. I remember the name. A couple of names of the Duncombe. A couple of names. I remember the names of the overseers that watch over them.
Awesome, Ms. Chase. So it is our hope that we can continue this discussion and further talk about the history of surnames as well, and having an understanding of where we come from based on our surnames.
We have loyalist names.
We have loyalist names, most of us.
Yeah, most of us have the loyalist names. Yeah, loyalist names. Yeah.
Does anything come to mind? Any names come to your mind off the top of your head?
Oh, I've really researched a lot of them. There's only one, like the William Wiley. William Wiley came here as governor. They're the Wileys. He came out of Ireland he was the last governor of Virginia, and then before he came to the Bahamas. And
okay, so that's Wiley, and he has an Irish background.
Yeah, he has an Irish background. He went from Ireland to the United States, when the United States was part of England. He went there as governor, and then from there he was sent to the Bahamas. And then we have Lord Dunmore. His name was John Murray. Murray was his name. He came out of the United States as well. And all the Murrays here and last name with the last name Murray. There you go. There's not very many. It's not very. It's not very many. But
Yeah,
Murray,
that's
and
not. Yeah, that's not really. Yeah, not a lot.
it's not very many of them, but they came here with John Murray. He was the Lord Dunmore.
And so that's why sometimes it seems like there's a lot of rolls. The rolls from Exuma.
But there was more rolled slaves in Exuma than any other. Don't forget they had 5 plantations in Exuma. The man gave all the slaves his name, or the British government gave them his name.
And then you also talk about Hepburn as well.
James Hepburn, I know him like I know you, like I met you. I met him online. I met Hepburn. I met Mr. Hepburn. I was so impressed with him because he was president of the Loyalist Association.
Wow, awesome.
The head of the they have political parties in the House, so they have the government or they have the opposition. He was the leader of the opposition party in the House of Assembly, James Hepburn.
Awesome. So I want to thank you for sharing all this information today. Hopefully we can further discuss and dive a little bit into the contract and into the Gullahs in South Carolina and our connection with those.
Close connection. Close. Very close.
So I want to, go ahead.
Thank you so much for, I have a lot of history. I'm trying to document. My book should be ready soon. I just need to add the runaway slaves. I need to list them. I have about 100 of them runaway slaves. I got to add them into the book so persons can know which plantations they run away from.
Awesome. And then there's also the runaway slaves as well, right?
Yeah. There's over 100. I have 52 pages of runaway slaves on the list I found. Isaac Ballou had some from Blue Hill Road. He had a plantation on Blue Hill Road. Isaac Ballou. He was a French loyalist. Some slaves ran away from his plantation. And then I have some runaway slaves from the persons who started the Baptist churches on Meaton Street.
So as a slave, when you would have run away, I mean, where can you go? Do you go to?
What they did when they ran away, from the States. Some of them ran away from when they were in their hometown in the States. And then some run away in New Providence, and they were being hidden by the freed slaves would hide them wherever they lived, maybe over the hill or wherever they lived, they hide them there. And then some of the white people were hiding the runaway slaves. So therefore, if a slave ran away, they would advertise you in the Bahamas Gazette, and they would say they'll pay £10 for each slave. If 2 ran away, they pay £10 each for each slave, and they also pay £10 to the persons who found out who they ran away to. So the persons would charge would pay about $30 to find the 3 of them.
Oh wow! So I'm going to thank those for listening. Queen Adderley, I want to thank you for listening in. So they would pay money for these runaway slaves.
Yes, they pay for runaway slaves, and these are loyalists who the slaves run away from. Everyone, once a slave got into Nassau, once they got into St. Augustine, then they were free to run away and go wherever they need to go. You can't, if you were one person bringing 50 slaves down out of, let's say, Beaufort, South Carolina, you can't control all 50 of them. They will run away.
So can you confirm what is St. Augustine? I hear you mention it before.
St. Augustine, Florida.
Okay. So you would have had slaves who would have ran away from St. Augustine.
Because the loyalists in the southern colonies was sent to the only British place that was, because the Americans were warring. So they had to find some place to send the loyalists who were loyalists to King George III. They had to find someplace safe to send them. And the only place in the southern colonies that was safe and was still British was St. Augustine, Florida.
Oh, okay.
So they sent all of them. There was thousands of them, all kinds of slaves and loyalists and distant cows and all kinds of things. So was in St. Augustine. Because when they bring their stuff or the colonies, the Georgia and Georgia, Alabama, and all those different places. All them came down at the same time.
Awesome. So Vivian Pitter, she's watching from Jamaica. Thank you, Vivian, for joining us today. Do you have anything that you can tell her about slavery in Jamaica?
Well, I can tell her one thing for sure. There's some person, I won't tell her the person's name, but I have the will of a certain person who purchased his slaves in Jamaica and brought them to the Bahamas. And
wow.
He purchased, I think there's the mountains in Jamaica, I forget what you call them. She would know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I have a listing of the slaves he brought in from Jamaica to the Bahamas. I have a slave list.
That would have been a long journey. That would have been a journey. So he brought slaves from Jamaica to the Bahamas.
Well, this man was a man who was working for the British government, so he had means of getting this way. He was working in Jamaica. He was working for the British government in Jamaica. So he brought his slaves from Jamaica with him to the Bahamas.
Oh wow. So Bling Queen Adderley is asking that she understand that there were two sets of Adderleys. And she wants to know if that's true. You have different spelling. You have one with the E and one without the E.
Well, the ones with the E and without the E, they're all the same. Because what happened during early writings, persons couldn't spell these different names. So just how you say it is how they wrote it. But even though they have a different E or whatever, but it's still Adderley, they're all the same family, but the name was changed during birth certificate, death certificate, marriage, and when writing up official documents.
So it's just a matter of not being able to spell so much.
It's just being able to, whoever wrote the certificate stuff up in those days probably wrote it the way how it sounded to them, but they couldn't even spell or write. They wrote it just how they feel like writing it, but that's the same. Because Albury, Alburie, Albray, all those names like Albury, spelled different ways, they're all the same, Albury, Albury.
And then you have the Libon with the N, and you have the Libon with the E.
They're the same ones. Going back into history, that's when the names got misspelled.
And then you have the Clark with the E and the Clark without the E. So it's the same difference.
Same family, even the Stewarts and the Stewarts are the same. Stuarts and Stewarts.
Oh yeah. You have those who spell it differently.
And Hutchison and Hutson and all those are the same names.
Awesome. So Miss Adderley is saying thank you for that clarity. Seeing people. And Miss Pitter is saying she is a history officer at the Ministry of Education in Jamaica. And so, Miss Pitter, thank you so much for joining us today as well. I know your country has a vast amount of history as we celebrate Emancipation Day as British colonies. And we think about our freedom. Are we really free? Miss Chase, are we really free?
No, we not. We're free and our bodies are free. But someone needs to go back in our history and get some things straightened out.
We need to correct some stuff, right?
I told the lady in Jamaica that the British government took the slaves from Jamaica into Halifax, Nova Scotia.
Oh wow!
That's where the Jamaicans said. They have a Jamaican colony in Halifax.
Wow. So can you repeat that? Just adjust your camera just a little bit, Miss Chase.
The British government, because of Jamaica.
Could you adjust your camera just a little bit? Yeah. Okay. Go ahead. Okay, that's great.
The British government, I forget which year it was, but it took their HMSB, whatever the boat was. They took a lot of Jamaicans out of Jamaica into Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada. There's a colony of Jamaicans in Halifax, and y'all can look it up online, but that's where they live. They've been there for couple hundreds of years. And when they went to Halifax, it was very, very cold. And some of Jamaicans said it was too cold and the white people did not like them. So the British government took them to Freetown, which is in, I think, Freetown is in Nigeria or Sierra Leone. Anyway, they took them from Canada back to Africa, and then from Africa, some went back to Jamaica. So they made a round the world trip.
Wow! But then, what do you think there were still some that remained in Halifax, Canada?
Oh, they have a colony of Jamaicans in Halifax.
Oh wow!
A whole settlement for them.
Wow!
They have a black town in Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada, for Jamaicans.
Wow! So Miss Adderley, she's asking if the wood and woods are related. She has a coworker who's saying that the wood and woods are not related.
They are related. I tell you, when people couldn't say what they were saying, they write what they feel like writing. That's what they need to go back in history and change these things, because they're getting people confused.
Wow.
They're the same family.
Yeah, because
they called me and I look it up for them.
Wow. And I always wondered, why do we have some without the E? Why do some spell their last name with the E? You have some with Clark, and then some spelled with the C-L-A-R-K-E, and some with C-L-A-R-K without the E. Okay, what's the difference?
No, there's no difference. Oh. They're all the same family. But I tell you that back in the day, when you had people writing up certificates and legal documents and papers and whatever, no one was looking over them to see what they were writing, you know. Wow. They write whatever they feel like writing. Nobody checked them, because maybe the persons who were supposed to check them didn't know themselves what was going on.
So we have some interesting history, and sometimes when you think about slavery, you think about it, being taught these things in school. You don't really think about these persons and their personalities. But the way how you discuss the slaves today, and I kind of imagine some of them with their personalities, like you would have talked about the rebels in Exuma and those from different islands, and those ones who you talked about who would have gone bird hunting and those ones it's
Exuma, you can just pluck Exuma right out of the islands, 700 islands, and put that by themselves. In fact, Exuma is 366 islands.
Oh wow.
Islands and Keys, there's 366 islands there. That's why I'm saying that the 700 islands where they say the Bahamas has is incorrect. That's another thing they got to change. Because if Exuma has 366 and Abaco has some, and then New Providence gets some islands around us, how come it's only 700?
We are a nation of many, many islands.
Yes. Oh, wow, Deidre.
A nation of many islands. So I want to thank you for enlightening us today. Can you adjust your camera one more time? I want to thank you. Thank you. You got, okay, right there. Thank you. I want to thank you for enlightening us today and sharing this information. And it's definitely a lot to unpack as we think about history.
It's quite a bit.
And our connections to the British, as well as our connections to the Americas.
Oh yeah, that's why Bahamians like to go to the States. They like to go away to Atlanta.
Well, one particular state, Florida, right?
They love Florida. Yeah, they love Florida. They love Florida. In fact, they just want to be over there in any case. In any part of the States they want to be, because that's where their ancestors are. Some of the persons who they brought out of the Carolinas or whatever, they didn't bring everybody. Some of these people have their relatives still over there, Black relatives still over in the States. But they don't know. The only person that know where their relatives are is the ones of the Abaco. Now they know that then some of those Malone people know their ancestors are from North Carolina, so they go and visit them every year before the pandemic.
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
They
And then
going
there's
from
also Bahamian community in Florida as well.
exactly. A lot of Bahamians, my relatives over in Florida. A lot of them are in Florida. A lot, but they visit back and forth. Then some persons want to know. I met a family just about 2 years ago, and she told me she had to get into Cat Island. Her last name was Thurston. So the family was all across the United States. They came together. They came into Nassau for a family reunion. Then they got a charter. This is because their spirit was telling them they need to know where they come from. So they went to Cat Island. There's a place in Cat Island called Thurston Hill. That's where they went to visit.
Awesome, awesome. So, Ms. Chase, thank you so much for sharing this information with us today. You're a busy lady. We will definitely love to continue this
No,
discussion.
we've been talking for more than an hour.
Yeah. So we definitely love to continue this discussion. You talk about Pompey as well. I mean, I saw Pompey in the history book. Yeah, they touch a little bit on him, but we didn't really talk about his impact and his contributions,
But
and
Pompey
that
was
he was a educated slave.
he was only 33 years old.
Wow. Wow.
33. You know that Jesus was 33 too, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
Pompey was 33 years old when he did all this stuff. He was whipped 39 times in Nassau, and when when they sent him back to Exuma, he was whipped another 39 times.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Thank you, Ms. Pitta. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you so much. Thank you, thank you. Ms. Chase, again, I want to thank you for sharing a little bit of history with us as we consider Emancipation Day throughout
Yes,
the
yes,
British
you're
colonies, the
a
British
prayer for,
territories. And
a
so
prayer,
with that, sorry?
say a prayer for Pompey, that one day he'll be recognized and there'll be Emancipation Day will be the Pompey Emancipation Day.
As we consider his impact on Emancipation Day, and like as you would have mentioned, the revolt that would have caused the British to want to speed up the day for
Exactly.
Emancipation Day. Yeah.
They did. They were so afraid that the Exuma people were gonna run over them.
Thank you.
Listen, you all have a blessed evening.
Awesome. And so
I said prayer to you all.
with that, Ms. Chase, we will end this session, and we would love for you to have a wonderful evening. To those listening in, I want to thank you for listening into the session today. Remember to follow us for future notification and like our page and follow us on our other social handles. So with that, we will end this session today, and I want to thank you for joining us. Ms. Chase, I want to thank you as well for sharing and imparting your knowledge with us today, and it's our hope that we continue this discussion. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.
You too. You too. Thank you.
Thank you.